MusclePharm has a new CEO, and it's a name that supplement industry veterans will know well. Before I rip that band aid off, let's just talk about how I stumbled on this sort of public, sort of not yet public information. Most of my audience understands I was once employed by MusclePharm during the early 2010s, kind of golden years when the sports nutrition brand was in its hyper growth phase. Even though MusclePharm was once my baby, it's been 10 years since I used it as my springboard to launch my strategy consulting company. While the proverb, absence makes the heart grow fonder, would certainly describe how I feel about the experience I gained during my muscle farm employment, it doesn't hold up when describing my affection for the muscle farm brand. See, the muscle farm today is unrecognizable to the one that I left. Because of that, the closer I pay attention to it, the more I grow frustrated at how far it has fallen. So I've learned to just kind of tune it out for the most part. Now, that doesn't mean I don't roll my eyes at social media posts from time to time. That's how this all kind of started, though. I realized a few weeks ago that there were some workout images that were being posted on the Muscle Farm social media that dated back to my era. You know, the UFC lead sponsor era, the associated with NFL noisemakers era, the hottest kid on the block, high contrast black and white against that huge bright lime green MP era. That should make me smile, right? Maybe if those posts weren't cropped all wrong, blurry, with fonts that wouldn't meet any Muscle Farm brand standards back then, and I can go on and on. But that didn't even get a rise out of me that was big enough for me to explore any deeper. It was only after I got a question asked to me on Twitter that I put two and two together. Because of the quarterly financial update content that I put together for years, there's a small group of Muscle Farm retail investors that follow my commentary on the Muscle Farm company and overall the functional CPG industry. The person that asked the question about what I thought about the new CEO and who it was then proceeded to send me a screenshot of an Instagram exchange between Muscle Farm and a customer. The person stating to be the new CEO signed off as Big E. Now, Big E isn't a nickname that tells you much if you're not a supplement industry veteran, but those of us that are in the space and have been in the space for a long time know that that's Eric Hillman. After I reached out to a few people, it was confirmed that Eric Hillman is indeed the new CEO at MusclePharm. Sorry, that was a bit of a long winded story, but for the rest of this content, I do want to focus on some basics of who Eric Hillman is, what he's stepping into at MusclePharm, and what could be on the horizon. Now, in 1990, Eric Hillman co founded Europa Sports Products, a distributor that focused on nutrition CPG products that were mostly in the niche of sports and active nutrition. Up until very recently, and maybe it still is, I don't know, these are not really public numbers, it was the largest specialty distributor in the space. When Europa Sports Products acquired its second largest competitor, Lone Star Distribution, in 2016, the combined revenue was around a $500 million. While things went well, at least initially with that business combination, cracks began to show with pressure coming from the changing marketplace dynamics. Now, you guys have heard me mention these time and time again, but you had the dissemination of the category, you had product proliferation from low barriers to entry, and a mainstreaming consumer effect that came with extra strength because technology changed the balance of power. These are all essentially the same reasons behind the struggles that happened at the Vitamin Shop, GNC, and Bodybuilding.com in the late 2010s. In 2021, Europa Sports Products went through a restructuring that saw a ownership change, a leadership change, and a name change to Europa Sports Partners. If you do want to kind of learn more about all of this and what I perceived went wrong with Europa Sports Products slash partners, I did a piece of content in May of 2021 on this matter, and I'll post it up here, right here, and I'll also link it in this content's description. To my understanding, Eric Hillman left sometime in 2021, though he has been focusing on other personal and entrepreneurial passions for a bit of time before that. So, what can we kind of expect out of the Hillman era compared to the Ryan Drexler era? This is just my opinion from an outsider's perspective, but firstly, I think Eric Hillman, at least from my perception, appears to be a much more hands on operator currently. Secondly, Eric Hillman has a much longer history and experience with MusclePharm. This is important because Drexler came in at the top and tried to keep catching the falling knife. Now, Eric Hillman felt and was a part of the heyday of Muscle Farm as a big distributor of them and knows the value of its heritage and looks to be leveraging it in at least the kind of legacy product or resurrecting some aspects of that. Thirdly, Eric Hillman has a great deal of equity in the market. If he wants to flex it, he can quickly get initial sales revenue up in the specialty channel, especially small specialty channel, persuade talent to pitch in, at least in his transformation plan, and rebuild trust with the supply side partners like manufacturers and ingredient suppliers. This is just a snippet of my thoughts on what I'm admittedly still trying to form, but Eric Hillman isn't a chump businessman and he has value here as the CEO. I give him all the respect for what he's built at Europa Sports Products and the overall impact that he had in building and growing the sports and active nutrition market over the last 3 decades. But the muscle farm that Eric Hillman is being handed needs a lot. The chance of getting back to the heyday of Muscle Farm, both in its influence slash impact and revenue, is a statistical anomaly. But even clawing back to the level of the last few years will be extremely tough. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but let's kind of quickly look at this from the business and financial point of view. Now, on the business front, love him or hate him, after Brad Pyatt resigned, all the vision for Muscle Farm left with him. The last 5 to 6 years at Muscle Farm has been filled with the chasing of off-brand trends. They've been kind of totally wrecking any semblance of brand standards and basically losing all emotional connection with its customers. Where does this usually lead you? Serving the wrong master. And what I'm kind of talking about here is chasing selling retail dollars. Without supporting the brand customer long term, eventually velocities start to slow and you can even lose those placements altogether. Muscle Farm had key customer risk with one retailer that was at an alarming percentage, and that was Costco. It's really a perfect retail partner within the last few years, especially in that HABA category, but only if you can meet their most important needs. They want operational excellence and consistent pricing strategy. You mix some external challenges with commodity inflation and internal strategic problems and kind of turnover with the weak financial position of Muscle Farm, and the worst nightmare scenario easily happens. While it's not the retailer's fault, Costco also played a major role in that weakening of the financial outlook for Muscle Farm. Yes, it was the biggest driver of top line revenue, but it also was high volume, low margin business that turned negative margin with the protein costs that were skyrocketing over the last 2 years, and Muscle Farm fearing what price increases would do to its relationship with Costco. Even with huge cost cutting measures that have been taking on at Muscle Farm, the company could not sustain profitability. That led Ryan Drexler to continue to inject his own money into the company while also having to renegotiate terms of expired convertible debt. I think the last time I looked, the current debt load at Muscle Farm was a little bit over $20 million. With debt becoming even more expensive by the day and financing really drying up for consumer companies that aren't profitable, let alone having a negative growth rate. Now I can definitely keep going, and I didn't want to get into the accounting items and why Muscle Farm hasn't released its financials in 2022 because for this content, I wanted to keep this really kind of short and sweet because there's going to be a part two. I've been sitting on some information for days, but for ethical reasons, I'm not going to disclose it until I see public mentions. I'm not that guy. There's really no incentive for me to do that. So don't ding me for not sharing it yet. I promise when I do see public mentions, I will give my perspective on that, and it will be definitely insightful and impactful. But I hope you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you did, consider hitting the like button to support me. Also, help me get to my short term goal of 2,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to see you join me on this journey, but we need to fix the fact that slightly less than 80% of you that are watching this YouTube video right now are not subscribed to my channel for some reason, and that makes me extremely sad. But I do want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.